All right, y'all. So as you likely have heard, former President Joe Biden was recently diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. And I've seen many progressive commentators not only show a lack of sympathy for him, but they go as far as to outright celebrate it, to celebrate the fact that he has cancer and that he might not have long to live. If you're confused why this is happening, let me explain. I'm going to explain why progressives are indifferent about this, and then afterward, I'll give my take on it. So let me start by taking a step back. Those of us on the left have recognized that Joe Biden's legacy on domestic policy is decent, at least relative to the several, previous administrations. It wasn't amazing, but I have to admit he was the most progressive president on the domestic side of things in my lifetime. Now, I'm pretty young, so the bar is very, very low for progressive presidents. We haven't had a true progressive since FDR. Biden's Build Back Better framework, which was the platform that he ran on in 2020, was very progressive. That's one of the reasons why he beat Trump in a landslide, was because he had a broad coalition and he actually tapped into the progressive base pretty well because of the policies he ran on. Soon after he got into office, though, he realized, oh shit, we are going to have a real difficult time passing much of Build Back Better. So you know what they did? They scrapped 80% of it. Now, the 20% that they left in there was pretty good stuff. But the point is, soon after Biden got elected, he stabbed the progressive base in the back by giving up on Build Back Better. So on domestic policy, he was the most progressive out of all the presidents in my lifetime. Now, like I said, the bar is low. You had Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump. The bar is low for being progressive. So Biden's record on the domestic front is not the reason why so many progressives hate him and are celebrating his cancer diagnosis. Although, yes, it's true that he didn't go far enough. He should have supported Medicare for all. He should not have abandoned Build Back Better. In the grand scheme of things, at the end of the day, he's still a centrist. He didn't run on that. He ran on very progressive policies, but he abandoned it very quickly. So I guess I'm burying the lead here. The reason why so many progressives are outright celebrating Biden's cancer diagnosis is because of Gaza, because of Israel. Like I just described, Biden's legacy on the domestic front is decent, relatively, but his legacy overall is stained with the blood of tens of thousands of Palestinians who have been murdered by Israel's illegal war, and really what is a genocide, in Gaza and soon to be West Bank and beyond, if we're being honest. So Joe Biden, while he was president, not only armed and funded Netanyahu's genocide, but he also failed to stand 10 toes down on the red lines that the U.S. drew for Israel. Earlier last year, I believe, Biden's White House made a statement that said their red line with Israel, which just means, if they do a specific action that is too extreme, we will stop arming and funding them. One of those red lines was Rafah. Rafah was a southern region that the Israeli government told Palestinians who were fleeing from the worst war-torn areas of Gaza to flee to. Israel guaranteed safety and refuge for Palestinians if they stayed in Rafah. Then, unsurprisingly, Israel hinted that they were going to attack Rafah because of potential Hamas activity. Biden then said, you cannot bomb Rafah. The White House came out and said, do not do that. That is a red line for us. That's too extreme. Well, as you may remember, Netanyahu not only bombed the hell out of Rafah, killing hundreds of innocent Palestinians in the process, he did so with a smile on his fucking face. And guess what the Biden administration did about it? Nothing. The red line was crossed, but yet didn't do anything about it. That's weak sauce leadership if I've ever seen it. So back to the main point of this video. Why are so many progressives celebrating Biden getting cancer? Simply, it's because many progressives cannot see Biden in any other way than Genocide Joe. I'm not saying that I agree with this take, but I'll get to that in a couple minutes. But many on the left recognize that when Joe Biden was president, he armed and funded a genocide of the Palestinian people and failed time and time again to keep Israel accountable when they crossed red lines, when they continued to violate human rights. And for many of us on the left, that's inexcusable. You can be based as hell on domestic policy. You can be great on economics. But if you're funding a genocide and continuing to arm a bloodthirsty government in Israel, then nothing else matters. That's the perspective of many on the left. So when Biden gets a cancer diagnosis, many on the left think, okay, he's a monster. So he armed and funded a genocide to which minimum 150,000 innocent civilian Palestinians, men, women, babies, have been murdered. So he was complicit in a genocide. How could you feel sympathy for that man? That's one perspective. Now let me swing to the other side real quick. There's many on the left who are sympathetic of Joe Biden getting cancer, right? Stage 4 prostate cancer. Many progressives hold on to the sentiment that I wouldn't wish cancer on my worst enemy. Cancer has touched most people's lives. If you're anything like me, cancer has taken the lives of many of my family members. So I personally know cancer. I know it very well. It's devastating. It's evil, it's ruthless. So when you see someone get diagnosed with such an aggressive form of cancer, many default to feeling sympathy. Now, those progressives might not have the same aggressive sentiment when it comes to celebrating, like outright celebrating Joe Biden getting cancer. So you can both sympathize with him for getting cancer, you can feel sympathy for his family perhaps, while at the same time hating what he was complicit in. Hating the genocide that he armed and funded. Some progressives can do that. Perhaps they're saying what he did doesn't define who he is. Like, for example, if this genocide never happened, pretend for a second that this whole situation didn't exist. Biden's legacy, according to the left, would be something like, oh, he was, not as progressive as he should have been. But he was, an old man, a decent dude, blah, 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 like whatever. And a lot less people would feel indifferent about his cancer diagnosis. More people would feel sympathy. That kind of summarizes that camp of progressives. Now, here's my take. This might be controversial, but I agree with both sides. Let me explain. I can empathize with people who hate Joe Biden because of arming and funding a genocide. And if you see him as a monster, if you see Joe Biden in no other light than Genocide Joe, then I'm not going to disagree with you or say that you're wrong when you say, fuck Joe Biden, he armed and funded a genocide. He got cancer? Good. Awesome. I wouldn't go as far as to use that language, but I can empathize with your perspective, and I'm not saying you're wrong, because you think he's a bad person. While the other progressives who aren't using the celebratory language around his diagnosis don't see him as a bad person, they see him as a good person who did a bad thing. Because good people, whatever that means, can do bad things, and bad people, whatever that means, can do good things sometimes. But I'm not going to disagree with you if you think that. Thinking someone's a bad person is subjective. It's like a taste. I'm not going to say that you're wrong if you don't like anchovies. So if you say that you think he's a bad person, that's your opinion. And I can see where you're coming from. I get it. Liberals and moderates are not going to like me saying this, but I support people in their choice to use this language to celebrate Joe Biden's diagnosis, because many on the left see him as Genocide Joe. Do you get that? Like, he armed and funded Netanyahu's genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza. Forget Build Back Better. Forget the Inflation Reduction Act. Forget the Chips and Science Act. Forget the 800,000 manufacturing jobs in the US. Forget the American Rescue Plan. Forget the stimulus checks. But I also agree with the other perspective. And I'm going to explain why I can support both perspectives in a second. Like I said, many people don't view a person as good or bad. They just view their actions as good or bad. So Joe Biden, like I said, if you take Gaza out of the equation, he was a decent dude, a man who's persevered through his whole life. He was a young senator. He lost his son. He was a cool vice president under Obama, a cool old man. So if you take Gaza out of the equation, it's like, how could you ever celebrate his cancer? So my point is, the perspective of many on the left is, he did a bad thing with Israel, but that doesn't make him a bad person when you have 60, 70 years of being a decent man. So to quickly summarize, some progressives hate Joe Biden because he was complicit and he armed and funded a genocide in Gaza. And there's no greater crime than a genocide. So you can't feel sympathy for a man who funded and armed one of the worst atrocities of our generation merely because he's sick. What about those tens of thousands of Palestinians who have died, children who are being amputated without anesthetics because of our weapons, our money? And I completely sympathize with that perspective, and I won't disagree. But I also agree with people who say, look, people aren't inherently bad or good, but people can do bad or good things. Look, Biden, as bad as he was, yes, he did arm and fund a genocide. Yes, that's inexcusable, unforgivable, but come on, man, it's cancer. Like, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And the reason I sympathize with that argument too is because I've lost family members to cancer. I lost my grandpa to cancer. So at the end of the day, whether you're on this side or that side, whether you're indifferent about Biden's cancer diagnosis, I can see where you're all coming from. I don't myself have a strong conviction leaning toward either side. And I think that's where we need to be. I think we need to be able to compartmentalize people's actions. Yes, he was relatively good on domestic policy and absolutely atrocious on foreign policy. Yeah, he was a cool old man who did some good things here or there for the economy. But yes, he's horrible for arming and funding a genocide. And that's blatantly inexcusable. If that's the sentiment that you relate to, where you're like, okay, Biden was horrible with Gaza, but man, it's cancer. Come on. I would say, great, and I agree with you, but you should also be open to listening to those on the left who are saying, fuck Joe Biden, he's a monster. I would never, ever feel sympathy for that man for anything. I think we're making a fool's choice here when we say you either have to be sympathetic or apathetic to Biden's cancer diagnosis. It's not black or white. It's very nuanced. And I know that might piss some people off. Like, no, it's absolutely black and white. He helped commit a genocide that's killed many, many people. My point is, people are not wrong for feeling sympathy for a man that got cancer. And people are also not wrong for not feeling sympathy for a man who armed and funded a genocide getting cancer. You need to be able to hear different perspectives out and understand that people's feelings on this issue are valid no matter which side it's on.